and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC.
The SABC is pleased to announce the launch of the new self-registration platform. Our vendors wishing to do business with the SABC can self-register on our internally developed platform. Our vendors are able to access this platform on our website at www.sabc.co.za/SABC/under e-tenders or self-register at etender.sabc.co.za and follow the prompts. Now visit SABC social media pages for more details.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
Political analyst Professor Susan Boyson warns that South Africa could see more provincial coalition governments after the 2029 general election. Speaking at the launch of the Coalition Barometer for 2023 to early 2025 by the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, Boyson highlighted that coalitions have become a permanent feature of South African politics. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Professor Susan Boyson. Prof, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, Prof, what factors are driving the increasing prevalence of coalition governments in South African provinces? And how do you see these dynamics evolving by the year 2029 in terms of general elections?
Yes, indeed, Lulu. In the previous election, we already saw an escalation. There are 3 coalition provinces in South Africa at the moment: Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and Northern Cape. And if we look at election trends, and especially those in the African National Congress, ANC, over the period from about 2004 and a few of the provinces only 5 years later in 2009, there's always been a systematic decline in their support. And in none of the cases has there been any upward blip in the graph. And if one combines that with the fact that we do not see political dynamics on the ground changing, we do not see a new groundswell of support for the ANC in the provinces where it still has the majority, then more coalitions become just more probable. And we can also note specific provinces like Free State, Mpumalanga, for example. After the last year's election, of course, they only came out in early 50s. And by all historical and current trend indications, there won't be an improvement. And these two then also have a good chance to slip into coalition territory. Northwest Province sitting on 58%, which means it could be safe if the ANC does not collapse further, like it did in KwaZulu-Natal, for example. And the only provinces that really seem safe after next year's election, if the current trends and rate of decline continues, will be Eastern Cape and Limpopo. And yes, wherever the ANC slips below 50% of the provincial support, coalition government is indicated. In many countries, of course, the biggest party in any election is allowed to govern. But in South Africa, the party has to have an outright majority or a 50% plus majority. And that means either coalitions in a formal sense of the word, like GNU, which is a coalition formally, will be indicated, or minority government. And one of the lessons that we also learned through this barometer from local governments where there is one overwhelmingly big party, albeit one without an outright majority. In some cases, several cases, it is the ANC, and this opposition party in those localities then does not have a chance to have a matching majority, to bring in a matching majority or construct a majority coalition. Those ones will then be for coalition or for minority government.
Now, Prof, how effective has the coalition barometer been in assessing the stability and performance of coalition governments in South Africa from 2023 to early 2025, and with the showing of a decline in volatility in coalition governed municipalities between these years, that's 2023 and early 2025. Yet there's minimal improvement in financial management and service delivery.
Yes, indeed. Well, in first case, I think the barometer is very accurate, very reliable. Of course, this is the second edition of this barometer. The first one started with the local government elections of 2021, and edition 1 ran from 2021 to 2023, and now barometer 2, the current release one, is 23 to 25. And we developed some very meticulous research instruments, monitoring instruments, that list all the indicators that we monitor for politics and for governance on the other side. And we along the 70 case studies, approximately 70, that turned out to be coalition governments locally in the 2021 elections. We've been monitoring those ones systematically, all changes coming in. And now we set the base for provincial and national government, also indicating all the factors that we are monitoring. So we are pretty sure that when we say this local government, for example, has stabilized, then we have got all the facts, and the barometer is actually a wonderful resource document. It's 500 plus pages, the big document. And so we hope that it will help serve as a recording of this phase in South African history. And yes, the other factor that you mentioned was that even when we see stabilization, that's in the last 2 years, 23 to 25, we saw fewer coalition turnovers altogether, changes, or just chopping and changes, smaller changes within an existing coalition. We saw less of that than in a period of great fervor just following the 2021 local government election. And yet, and that is the tragedy and irony, sadness of what this research shows, that even when these coalition governments then became more stable, we did not see necessarily an improvement in governance and in financial management of those municipalities. Of course, there are little exceptions here and there, but the overall trend is not in the direction of improvement. And part of the sadness of this is that this is very much the line that we see in all local government in South Africa, except for a few stars, exceptional good performers. The bulk of them, of the local municipalities, are just not up to the tasks that they have.
Now, how do you assess the long-term sustainability of the GNU, for instance, the Government of National Unity, particularly in light of potential flashpoints like the ANC's National General Council or the DA's Federal Congress, and looking at it from the barometer suggestion that despite tensions within these coalitions, just reading verbatim, over certain policies such as the Bella Act and the economic redress policies, the GNU remains a logical arrangement. Touch on that for us.
Yes, it's something that I really pointed out strongly, and that emerges from this research, is that South Africa's coalitions are pretty unique. Coalitions are inherently unstable and tumultuous. But in South Africa, I think we're taking it to new heights. And the rules of engagement of South Africa's national level coalition, by all indications, as you also alluded to in your question, is one of rough and tumble, is contestation, is acrimony, is toxic narratives in between. And we see crises proclaimed regularly, almost boringly regularly. And then it subsides again, and the main parties in the coalition, ANC and DA, again cooperate nicely for a few weeks, and the smaller parties are not mobilized to try to bring the ANC an alternative majority. This seems to be the way that coalition government is running in South Africa. We have seen so many cases now, a good 7 or 8 crises, where things were supposed to break apart, but they do not, and they emerge from that. And I think there is a sense of necessity of cooperation, despite so many ideological differences, despite a few policy differences, especially when it comes to race and redistribution. Then those coalitions, the big GNU coalition, really gets stuck. But beyond that, there is a great sense, apparent on the surface of it, that there is a need for cooperation and do things in a national interest or for the country, etc. And if we accept that is and that has been working in the first year, this is the rules of engagement between the parties, then it could indeed persist for a while.
Now, Prof, just the barometer references challenges with the mixed member proportional system and its impact on coalition stability. Now, are you able to elaborate on how specific aspects of South Africa's electoral system influence coalition governance, and what reforms may enhance stability without compromising democratic representation?
Yes, what we know from the electoral system, of course, is that national and provincial is a pure proportional representation system, whereas locally we're seeing so much instability, the great site of instability. There is this mixed electoral system where 50% of the wards locally, of course, are elected in terms of wards and councillors, and the other half proportional representation. And it is in that component of ward-based, constituency-based elections that we really have so much scope for instability, that councillors have found new political allegiances, then they resign, and there are by-elections. That's why we have by-elections at local government level and not provincially and nationally. And it's those ward-based systems that are a big source of instability because things can change. If it's a pure proportional representation system, the representatives are elected, and the party is elected for 5 years, and the party replaces, and the voters' choice at the time of the election, and they all know they vote for a 5-year term.
Your call has been placed on hold.
The choice is then there, and stability persists.
Well, Prof, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. We have run out of time and are going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you, Lulu.
That is South African political analyst, Professor Susan Boysen, joining us on the line. It is 22 after 12 Central African time.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@sabc.co.za. That's MOKOENATA @SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
The South African government is hosting the African Union AIP Water Investment Summit in Cape Town, as in the Western Cape of the country, which aims to mobilize investments for climate-resilient water infrastructure and unlock shared prosperity across the continent. The three-day gathering includes high-level political plenaries, sessions on investment and innovation, project showcasing and investment matchmaking sessions, and youth water investment track sessions, among others. And to discuss this further, we have on the line the Chief Executive of Umgeni Utugela Water, Sandile Mkhize. Sandile, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Sandile, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sandile, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how significant is this summit?
The summit is significant considering that when you are looking at the investment gap on water infrastructure in Africa is estimated at about $30 billion. So there needs to be a means and ways of closing this gap, so that capital infrastructure projects may be funded and be implemented that will ensure that there is water to the people of Africa.
Now, how will the summit address water challenges faced by the continent?
Well, when we look at the continent Africa, we are having two types of challenges. There is a challenge that is brought by the climate change at the moment, where you have either too much water in the form of a flood, or you have little water availability in the form of having an arid environment, which then causes water shortages in some areas. We have a population that is growing in Africa, and the demand for water, for potable water, is growing on daily basis. So there is a need to then look at how these infrastructure programs, including developing a large impoundment system to tap water that will naturally run into the sea, impound this water, and then treat it to a potable standard, and then have a delivery system through a bulk, regional, and local infrastructure to get to the consumers, which is the people, and to ensure that the economies are driven also by the water availability in Africa.
Now, what are some of the issues that will be discussed over the next 3 days?
What will be discussed in the summit over the next days is to look at the flagship projects that are being planned in Africa that require investment. We will also be looking at matchmaking, where utilities may share their infrastructure pipeline, water and sanitation infrastructure pipeline, and look at potential investors who have interest to invest in such projects, and also to look at de-risking the water infrastructure projects, because some of the investors are not willing to invest because of the inherent risks that water infrastructure projects, they are owned by governments, and the governance systems that are there makes private investors not to have appetite to fund such projects because of the governance concerns in the governments that are usually the owners of these water projects. So demystifying the governance and de-risking such will enable private sector to be able to participate and partner with the public sector in the funding and the implementation of this project. Typically in a triple P, which is a private-public partnership fashion.
And what are you hoping for with regards to the key outcomes from the summit?
What I'm hoping for is that there will be pledges that will be made at the end of the summit and commitments from private investors that will start to then close the gap of this $30 billion US dollar that is needed to fund the project. And also I'm looking at the partnership whereby we can learn from each other. As you may be aware that some countries in Africa are far advanced in implementing water projects. We need to then see if that experience cannot be utilized across Africa in the planning and implementation of capital infrastructure projects that relates to water and sanitation.
And just in wrapping up, Sandile, there are a number of talk shops and summits that take place and, with no time frames or time limits put in place. Are there going to be time limits and time frames put in place to ensure that this does take off the ground and it happens?
Definitely, I'm hoping that there will be a time frame. As you are aware that Sustainable Development Goal 6, SDG 6, is expiring in 2030, and Africa is lagging way behind in meeting the SDG 6. We need to then look at investment that will be talking to us, moving with speed towards achieving the SDG 6. And I believe that if we put a strict timeline, we will then be able to move and show a significant improvement towards meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 6.
Sandile, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today. That is the Chief Executive of Umgeni Utugela Water, Sandile Mkhize, joining us on the line. It is 12:30 Central African Time, and our news headlines up next with Jolani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Making headlines, Nigeria's military has killed 592 armed militia members in the northeastern state of Borno in the past 8 months. This comes after stepping up airstrikes in a region hit by years of violence. The Umkhonto weSizwe party in South Africa has turned to the High Court in Pretoria in an urgent bid to revive its challenge against President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to place Police Minister Senzo Mchunu on leave of absence. And finally, European leaders are to hold a series of meetings today, including with US President Donald Trump, to press the need to protect Ukraine's interests ahead of Friday's US and Russia summit. I will have details on these and other stories at 1 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
In this hour in our sports update, we kick off with rugby news. Springbok defence coach Jerry Flannery believes this year's rugby championship will be even more competitive than last year, which saw the South Africans walk away with the crown. With Joe Schmidt having settled into his role since taking over the reins from Eddie Jones last year, the Wallabies are believed to be on the up since their last meeting with the Boks a year ago. Flannery, who is familiar with Schmidt's work during the latest transformation of Irish rugby from 2013 to 2019, believes they will meet a more formidable Australian outfit this time around, along with usually strong New Zealand and Argentine sides.
think it's a phenomenal competition because you look back on last year, and I think that Argentina were like the dark horses that came out of nowhere and shocked New Zealand, and they beat us as well. So I think it's there's no weak team in the championship. That is it, and I suppose last year, if I was to look at it objectively now, the fact that Joe Schmidt had only just taken over after the World Cup meant that the Wallabies probably started slowly, and we benefited from that because we played them early in the championship.
On to football news. Having played 2 matches just 72 hours apart, Mulifinseki, the head coach of South Africa's Chan team, has now placed the ball in the physical training department to get the players back up to scratch as they enjoy a slightly longer window to their next game. Bafana drew 1-1 with Algeria last week Friday, then beat Guinea 2-1 on Monday. They face Niger in their next match on Friday.
The recovery turnaround period was a bit short for us. Looking into the intensity of the last game we played, but Guinea also played the same and they lost 3-0. So from our side, when it comes to our physical recovery and game readiness, we are looking deeper into our readiness. So we are looking into the next 3 days before we play Niger. So our physical conditioning coach and our medical team will have to work on the players.
American Fred Curley, a 2-time 100-meter Olympic medalist, has been provisionally suspended for failing to notify anti-doping officials of his whereabouts. That's according to the Athletics Integrity Unit. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, I'm Nosipo Zuma. In your business news this hour, South Africa's Minister of Transport, Baba Krisi, says the country's transport sector has set a target of reaching 42 million passengers through the Airports Company of South Africa network of airports by 2029. Her sentiments were shared with the media at the 3rd ICAO Next Generation of Aviation Professionals Global Summit taking place in Durban in South Africa. Krisi confirmed that they are also assisting other African countries to achieve global standards in aviation.
I'm told that of the 27,000 licensed professionals that we have, 7,000 are from the African continent. And obviously those are ones that are working in our ecosystem, but there are many thousands more that have been through our training programs.
South Africa's Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni, has emphasized the limited participation of small businesses in both regional and global markets. Speaking at the 2025 Pakistan-South Africa Trade Summit, she identified key barriers such as limited access to finance, inadequate infrastructure, and the shortage of effective business development agencies as major challenges. Innocent Simosa has more.
Pakistan is known to be a global player in textile and leather, while South Africa has a robust commercial infrastructure and regional distribution channels. The chairman of Pakistan-South Africa Trade Federation, Rafiq Memo, says effective trade zones, co-branding and professional sourcing arrangements can expand market access between the two countries.
Egypt has signed an agreement with China's Siloam Group to build an automotive tire factory in Suez Canal Economic Zone with total investments of $1 billion. The project's first phase will be completed in 2026. The Egyptian automotive tire industry is experiencing significant growth, fueled by rising vehicle ownership, increasing consumer awareness about tire quality, and infrastructure development. Egypt has been developing the automotive industry, including tire manufacturing, through programs like the Automotive Industry Development Program. Kenya's central bank lowered its benchmark lending rate by 25 basis points on Tuesday, saying there was room to ease monetary policy further as inflation remains well within target. The Central Bank of Kenya cut its policy rate to 9.50% from 9.75% previously, the seventh cut in a row. The decision was in line with median forecast in a Reuters poll of economists. And finally, the International Energy Agency IEA has raised its forecast for oil supply growth this year following a decision by OPEC Minus Plus producer group to hike production and lowered its demand forecast due to lackluster demand across the major economies. The AIA expects world oil supply to rise by 2.5% per barrels per day in 2025, up from 2.1 million barrels per day previously forecast. Now, according to the agency, world oil demand will rise by 680 barrels per day this year, down from 700,000 barrels per day previously forecast. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 535, and Botswana at 13 pula 33. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 429, and in Zambia it's 23 kwacha 14. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 flu 42. Russia is 79 rubles 58. India is 87 rupees 63, China at 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 65. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,346 and platinum at $1,333 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $66.81 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update, only on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
It is 12:42 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Now, in Gaza, Palestinian journalists work from makeshift tents and vans in harsh conditions, documenting civilian suffering while enduring war, displacement, and personal hardship themselves. Let's listen to this Reuters report.
They bear witness the suffering of civilians in the Gaza Strip, and they too suffer the pain of war and displacement. In Gaza, journalists sleep on thin mattresses in stifling heat. They work out of vans or makeshift tents converted into newsrooms. And their days are punctuated by filming ambulances bringing in casualties of war for triage. Israel's offensive in Gaza, now in its 22nd month, has left much of the territory in ruins. International journalists have been barred from entering Gaza since 2023. So the task of informing the world has fallen to people like Ezzaldine Al-Mazri, a freelance journalist and documentary filmmaker.
A journalist suffers from two missions during displacement. The first mission is that he, as a journalist, is being displaced from one place to another, where some of the logistics for journalistic work are available to him, such as electricity and the internet. However, he also needs to provide for his family, who are also destined for displacement, like the rest of the Palestinian people.
Israel's recent targeted killing of some journalists has also sent a chilling message. On Sunday, an Israeli airstrike killed 6 journalists, including prominent Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif, in a tent at Gaza City. The attack was condemned by journalists and rights groups. Israel's military said it targeted and killed al-Sharif, alleging he had headed a Hamas militant cell and was involved in rocket attacks on Israel. Al Jazeera and al-Sharif himself, before his death, denied such claims. The Committee to Protect Journalists says at least 186 journalists have been killed in the Gaza conflict. Under a strict Israeli blockade, hunger and starvation also pose a challenge. French news agency Agence France-Presse in late July called on the immediate evacuation of its freelancers and their families. This came after the AFP Journalists Association issued its own statement, saying colleagues in Gaza risked dying of hunger. Al Jazeera correspondent Momen al-Sharafi hopes more can be done for the plight of journalists there.
Our message to the world and the international community is that it is important to put pressure on the Israeli occupation authorities to provide protection for Palestinian journalists.
Israel denies deliberately targeting journalists. Instead, it says many of those killed in Israeli airstrikes were members of Islamist militant groups, working under the guise of the press. Israel's offensive in Gaza has killed more than 61,000 Palestinians, according to health officials. The war began when Hamas-led militants stormed over the border into southern Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking 251 hostages.
And that was a Reuters News report. It is 12:45 Central African Time.
Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
As the world grapples with a number of challenges, including the recent sweeping tariffs from the US, the Africa 50 is hosting its shareholders meeting in Maputo, Mozambique. The event is expected to be addressed by Mozambique's President Daniel Chapo. Africa 50 is one of the key institutions pushing for infrastructure development in Africa. Kaelihle Kumalo has filed this.
There's quite a lot expected. We know that infrastructure development, it is a very big issue in the African continent. For example, they do talk about the funding gap in the continent, really just stifling the economic growth of so many countries in the continent. But also, a lot of countries really are still really on tenterhooks in light of the sweeping tariffs coming from the United States of America. So Mozambique, for example, they were slapped with over 15% of tariffs. And the authorities in this country, they're looking at the mitigation in terms of those tariffs, especially when you look at this country. We saw those massive challenges with the unrest unfolding here in Maputo. It was really the epicenter of those protests, the anti-election, the post-election violence that's erupted here in Mozambique. But now things are looking fantastic. And also recently we saw Mozambique marking 50 years of independence from the Portuguese colonial rule. So President Chapo, who is currently the president here in Mozambique, is saying that it's really about rekindling the opportunities in this country, especially for the young people. But for the delegates at Jacques Mchisano International Convention Center, it's all about unlocking Africa's enormous potential and also looking at the internal mechanisms. During the course of the day, we're expecting to hear from the likes of Wamkele Mene, who is currently the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We're going to hear as well from the outgoing President of the African Development Bank. So a lot of them really talking about all these key projects in the continent.
That was Kylie Sekumalo reporting from Maputo in Mozambique.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
We apologize for the sound quality in this story coming up. The death of a 1-month-old baby girl who was a victim of female genital mutilation, FGM, in the Gambia has sparked widespread outrage. Police say the baby was rushed to a hospital in the capital, Banjul, after she developed severe bleeding. Amavi Akpa Magbo says, from Save the Children's Regional Director of West and Central Africa, shares some insights.
We understand that autopsy is pending to confirm the cause of this child's death. FGM has been banned in the Gambia since 2015, with prison terms up to 3 years or life if a girl dies as a result. The Gambia has one of the highest global rates. Up to 73% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 have undergone FGM before the age of 6. Last year, there was an attempt on the 15th of July 2024. The Gambian National Assembly rejected the bill to repeal that ban following strong civil society advocacy, including Save the Children's partner. Should this baby's death be confirmed to be caused by FGM, this will be a very sad reminder that a ban means nothing without action, that all actors, led by the government, must push for consistent enforcement of the law. People have thousands of reasons to justify the actions and decisions that they are taking these days in violation of human rights, and in particular this rising trend of anti-rights measures across the globe that we are witnessing. Measures that undermine women's and girls' human rights. At Save the Children, we are unapologetically held in our commitment to protect the rights of all individuals, regardless of gender or their gender identity. We are strongly committed to gender equality as a human rights issue and a precondition for sustainable people-centered development. And we call on all governments, not only in the Gambia, but in West Africa and in Africa in general, to uphold their obligations under international human rights laws.
That was Amavi Akpa Magbo, Save the Children's Regional Director for West and Central Africa. And we apologize for the poor sound quality in that story. It is 12:51 Central African Time.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le Diamant Rouge et Binal Export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. participation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa, it's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station. Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update, only on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa, it's time to plug into radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 12:54 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. A 2-year investigation has found that soldiers based at the British Army Training Unit Kenya, Batuk, continues to use sex workers despite being banned from doing so. The report added that more work was needed to stamp out the practice for more, to stamp out the practice basically. And now we are joined on the line by Marianne Mutubi, who is Commissioner with the KNCHR. She joins us on the line. Marianne, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here.
Now, Marianne, let's talk about, firstly, this investigation, a 2-year investigation happening, and now it's found that there is continuous use of sex workers. It has been 2 years. When did this all come out, and why is it still continuing, whether it's on a small scale or not? Why is it still happening?
The history of the British Army unit in Kenya, Batuk, goes back a long way. The British Army Training Unit in Kenya is by a defense cooperation agreement between Kenya and the British government to have their soldiers come and train in Kenya. And their base, one of their bases, is in central and northern Kenya. And the history of them sexually abusing women, both consensual and non-consensual, is long. But what we are dealing with now, and what you may be referring to, is the investigation that the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights has been dealing with in the last 2 to 3 years. And our approach has been, whether it was consensual or non-consensual sex, it is of no consequence. Our approach was through the children who are born. Now, these children are visibly different because they are mixed race, and because this is a far-flung area where you do not have many Caucasians, it is evident that these children were sired by non-blacks. This was our approach, and this is what you may be referring to.
Now, with that, what would be interesting to find out is whether these soldiers then, do they then take care of these children, or are these children left to the women to fend for?
There are two groups. There are those who had relationships with these women, and however, when they left, they have not taken responsibility for neither the women or the children. There is a larger group where they forced themselves on African women who had gone out to draw water or to fetch firewood or to herd their goats. And some of these were group rapes where they raped women. Some of these women were married women, and when later they delivered mixed-race children, they were chased away from their homes because the fact that you had sex, whether it was consensual or not, is stigmatized, especially when you have mixed-race children. So their livelihoods were affected. They moved away. There was stigma. And these children, of course, have not been taken care of by their British fathers. And some of these do not even know their British fathers.
So what is the plan of action now? The investigation has happened. The results are out. What's to happen going forward?
The results have been out for a long time. The Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Committee in Kenya, Commission in Kenya, flagged this idea out. Amnesty International has flagged it out. Our commission has flagged it out. But what was different in this case was that we took the approach of the children's rights. And we did this for the simple reason that if we can identify, we could use modern technology of paternity testing, DNA paternity testing, to establish who these fathers were. We raised this matter with the British government. It was raised in Parliament and so forth, but there has been no goodwill of identifying those whose fathers these men were. These British boys behaving badly, we believe that if there was goodwill, all we would need is the deployment list of the British soldiers in these areas at this time, 9 months before the birth of these children, each of these children, and then with the DNA analysis, we could identify the fathers. We, together with other partners, we have gone to court. We use DNA technology to determine that these children's DNA, ancestry DNA, was from Europe. And with that information, then we have had now a judgment in the UK that says that the British defense system is to give the names and the addresses of the men who supposedly or allegedly to have sired these children.
Yeah.
These are particularly where these fathers are known due to maybe they had a relationship with them.
Okay. Well, Marian,
so we're waiting for that outcome.
We have run out of time and are going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Marian Mutubi, the commissioner at the KNHCR, joining us on the line. Well, we have run out of time. Dabuho is here, and unfortunately, we won't be able to chat to him. But it is a happy hump day to him and to yourselves. And from us on Africa Update, our team, producer Tracy Bumgard, technical operator Ndandulu Tuli, and social media Sfiso Hlope and talent Butelezi. Thank you so much for joining us. And have a good one. Continue with us on our socials. Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. I'm Cholani Tulo-Webe. Nigeria's military has killed 592 armed militia members in the northeastern state of Borno in the past 8 months.